Thanks a lot for being here. While Mihai is still working out the logistics of having a picture, apparently we're not doing full screen, but that's all right. Welcome to this session. My name is Felix Rieseberg. I'm a developer evangelist for Microsoft Germany. I usually deal in Windows Phone and Windows 8. And PhoneGap is a technology that is mainly in the hands of Adobe, which is why I'm actually the guest on this stage. Mihai, do you want to present yourself?
Thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
My name is Mihai Corlan. Hello. Unfortunately, I don't speak German, so I apologize for speaking in English. I'm a developer evangelist for Adobe Systems. I think it's my second or third time in Köln. And it's my first time actually presenting or co-presenting with a Microsoft evangelist. I mean, who would have thought that an evangelist from Microsoft and another one from Adobe will co-present a session about an open source project. Isn't that cool? Give me 5. So thank you, Felix, for wanting to present with me. I've been working for Adobe since 2006. Actually, I came to Adobe through an acquisition. Adobe acquired in 2006 the Romanian company I was working for back then. We were building like web applications, Ajax frameworks, and this kind of stuff. And since 2008, I started to work for Adobe as a developer evangelist. I'm based in Bucharest, Romania. And I don't know why, but I travel a lot to Germany to present and meet people. And I'm happy to be here. I love beer.
Yeah, so the first part of the presentation is going to be about what the heck is PhoneGap, why do we talk about it, why are we so proud to present about it, and what makes it a cool software. So I want to dive in very quickly. And yeah, we already fixed that. We're going to have that slide up in a minute as well. I wanted to start by talking about mobile development. Mobile development today is a mess. Usually, if you have a client, especially in the client-based business, if you have a client and you want to go on any of the major platforms, what you usually do is you have to deal with a specific IDE, be that Xcode, be that Visual Studio, be that Eclipse. You have to usually learn a native language, Visual C# for Windows Phone, Objective-C for iPhone, Java for Android, all those big languages. And also you have to learn a specific philosophy of doing development, because all those platforms grew from different ecosystems, grew from other points of view, have different histories. And for that reason, developing one application on multiple platforms is usually not that different from developing individual applications at all. So usually that means if you go into the companies, and I actually consult companies a lot. If you go into companies, what you usually find is that you have multiple teams, and where you basically had desktop, web, and mobile development a couple of years ago, what you have today is you have desktop development, you have web development, you have iPhone development, you have Android development, you have Windows Phone development, you have BlackBerry development. You have all those teams which are going into different directions, making things usually quite difficult. On the other side, what we find a lot, especially in the client-based business, is that all those heavy lifting features and the features where performance really counts are not really day-to-day business. What we find, especially in Germany most of the time, is people have a certain set of content, a small set of interactivity, and a small set of features. They just want people to find on every single platform. And that's a rather special situation, because what you find is that the client sees that you're doing one application, be that on one platform or 2 or 3 or even 4, but you actually have to go there and build multiple applications. So, what can we do about that? If we talk about development and development on multiple platforms and multiple devices and in a very fragmented market, I think literally no other platform and no other development has such a long-running legacy in that area as HTML. And as you all know, HTML5 is probably the best language to address multiple platforms, multiple situations, multiple devices, like multiple things in any form. But HTML, for that reason, grew quite successful, but the thing we find is that it doesn't really have all the features we need to deliver a real application scenario, to deliver something clients usually want. what we find is HTML is a very good basis to deliver content. It's very good at interacting with different devices, interacting with different input methods. It's very good at being deployed on multiple machines. But it's lacking a certain set of features we just need. And I think notifications are one of those. Interacting with the camera belong to that. Interacting with the local file system. And there's a certain gap that has already been bridged by some of the features that are available within HTML5. If you think about geolocation, there are features within HTML5. There is a proposed standard to go into geolocation. But there's still a certain gap. People can still very easily distinguish between a native application and an application that has been written in HTML5 and is basically nothing else than running a browser control full screen. And as you know, I mean, most major platforms allow you to develop in HTML5. Just make a full browser control, run your application, you're fine. But there's still that huge gap that you find where you can't access the features that a phone usually offers. And that's exactly the point where PhoneGap comes in. And that's actually the point where PhoneGap got its, I think, pretty cool name. I'm sort of sad that it's called Cordova now, but that's the reason it was called PhoneGap, because PhoneGap is actually bridging that gap. It's bridging the gap that exists between HTML5 development being in the context of web development and being on a native phone. And what it does is it's using JavaScript. I don't know, some people have doubts about JavaScript, but it's actually quite powerful once you got to use it in its full extent. It's taking JavaScript and exposing native features as JavaScript APIs. And that's the point where a really cool second feature kicks in. And that is, once you have PhoneGap as a framework exposing native features as JavaScript APIs, those JavaScript APIs are the same on all platforms. On all platforms PhoneGap is working on. And PhoneGap is, as we will see in a minute, working on basically every single platform I know today. So that basically means you can write your full-fledged application using native features like geolocation, like context, like local file system, like the camera. We will do demos in a minute. And use the same code on all platforms. So what that basically means is you're able to develop once, take your application as it is, put it on top of the PhoneGap Cordova framework, integrate it into your applications within the native packages. You package it as a native application from Xcode, from Visual Studio, from Eclipse. PhoneGap integrates in those editors. And go and deploy a native application that looks like a native application, has the features as a native application, and actually works like it. And another part I want to go into very briefly is that of law, because I think Adobe did quite a pretty cool thing here, and I think it was pretty smart. And that is, as you all know, PhoneGap started out as an open source technology made by Adobe, a very cool company, very good company. They were cool enough to be acquired by Adobe. And what people were afraid of, and I think they were right to be afraid of, is if you have a kick-ass open source project and a company, another big company, is acquiring the company that has the rights to that project, people were afraid to build on top of a framework that now belongs to a big company. You don't really want to build on top of something that belongs to someone else, because then your fundament is always kind of out of your reach. So what Adobe did is it basically made PhoneGap, the core, open to Apache. And I think Apache is one of the most kick-ass open source communities we know. And now PhoneGap in its core is managed by Apache. The rights are managed by Apache. But Adobe is very successfully delivering a whole experience around it, delivering kick-ass services, supporting it. Obviously, Adobe is one of the biggest contributors. Microsoft as well, IBM, Intel, we have a couple of contributors. And what we have right now is, I just want to say, this is full open source. You have loads of features made available by big companies. You have very good integration into the usual big IDEs. But you have a fundament that is essentially open source and free to use for both personal and commercial projects. So let's talk features. How does that look? Basically, we have one big Chromeless browser. Depending on what we're developing in, that looks like a normal Chromeless browser, or it might be called PhoneGap or Cordova control browser, something like that. And you're basically displaying an HTML page in your application. The only big difference is, and that's where the second part comes in, the API bridge. you can use JavaScript namespaces and JavaScript APIs that can access those native features. So what you basically do is, if you say, I want to use a camera UI, the native camera UI, most platforms have native camera UIs you can use to get pictures, to access the media library. All those commands that go into a certain feature are the same across platforms. And so you can basically develop an application once, put it in your native application. So you have, if you're doing a Windows Phone application, you're using Visual Studio. If you're doing an iOS application, you're using Xcode. If you're doing Android, you're using Eclipse. If you want to do better, or WebOS, or all those other platforms, which are actually supported as well, you can go into their respective native development cycles. And then you package it as a native, locally running application that is just looking like a normal application. You can put it into the individual stores, and you can sell it. You can do all those things you do with native applications. So let's look at the supported platforms, which I think is pretty cool, if you think about it. PhoneGap supports iOS, Android, BlackBerry. You'll see that we have BlackBerry up there in multiple versions because BlackBerry in itself has multiple features. You can't expose a Compass API to a system that has never seen a Compass, which is why we distinguished it here. We have WebOS, Windows Phone, Symbian, and Butter, which probably spans across most of devices people use. If you think about smartphones, I don't think we missed anything. This is pretty solid. So let's talk features. I know this is a huge table. It grew larger over time. It was smaller once, but it's quite complex now. So what you basically see is full support for iPhone, full support for Android, full support for Windows Phone. Most of the points where you see no check today is not because PhoneGap hasn't matured enough to support a certain feature. Most of the time, the reason is the system itself doesn't support the feature we want to support. So obviously, if you think about, for instance, if you think about a file system or think about a media library, the earliest BlackBerry systems don't really have a media library. So you can't really support a media library that's not even there. But yes, that's about it. That's about it from my side. I will jump in later to show you how that works in Visual Studio. But I would hand over to Mihai now to give you some really cool demos on iPhone and iPad and other features.
Thank you, Felix.
Thank you.
How are you doing, guys? Are you hungry? Thirsty? Want some beer? OK, so before showing you some examples of PhoneGap or Cordova applications, I want actually to ask you two questions, maybe. Who here actually already knew what PhoneGap or Cordova is? Maybe you can raise almost everybody. OK, who here actually created at least one PhoneGap application? Not so many, shame. And for what platforms, can I ask? Android? iOS? Windows? OK. RIM? BlackBerry, I mean? OK. Who here actually saw a PhoneGap application running on any mobile device or tablet? Only one people. What about the others who said that you already developed? I mean, you didn't see the end result of your work? That's cool. It's like extreme agile development. OK, so I have here like a nice setup that should help me to show you the screen. The light is not with us, but we'll manage. The first application I want to show you, it's actually from Wikipedia. And I don't know the insights, but Wikipedia actually used to have like a native application on mobile devices, right? So probably on the iOS, it was built with Objective-C and so forth. I think this year, they decided to switch to PhoneGap. I can only, I don't know, make some assumptions, like maybe it is easier for them to maintain the application and leverage all the web services or the REST APIs they have on the servers. But nevertheless, what you see here on my iPad, it's actually a PhoneGap application. And by the way, I will use interchangeable the PhoneGap term with Cordova. So just to clarify, PhoneGap, it's just the name of Adobe's distribution of PhoneGap, of Cordova, sorry, okay? So if I say PhoneGap, actually I mean Cordova or vice versa. Now, this application, it's, as you expect, you can search for something, I don't know, Germany maybe? Okay. And we can find all sorts of features, and you can choose a different language, for example. Maybe, I don't know English, I want to see everything in German. I can also bookmark or save some article I found. And then, of course, I can retrieve the bookmarks. And also, I can play a little bit with the font size, for example. Like, in my case, I don't see very well. As you can see, I'm wearing glasses, so large, it's perfect for me. So what do you think about this application? Isn't it cool? I mean, what do you expect? Is just the Wikipedia? Do you need, I don't know, sound effects, 3D animations, and other stuff? I think not. So if some user decides for some reason that he's not comfortable using the Wikipedia web page, he can go to the application store, grab the Wikipedia native application, install that application, and enjoy all the knowledge available in Wikipedia, right? What else? I have another application called 2010 Census, and basically this application uses the census data from the United States from 2010 and allows you actually to visualize those data. The data are like, let's call it open source. They are available to anyone who wants to see them. And a colleague of mine built this application with PhoneGap just to illustrate maybe some use case more relevant to enterprise applications where you tend to have lots of data that you want to display them in a meaningful way, right? So I can choose from the left side, I can choose a state. Let's see, I don't know, maybe I can go with California. And then I have a list with all the counties from California. And I don't know, El Dorado County sounds really cool. And then I'm presented with the data itself. And just for the record, I want to stress this out. All the data are actually coming from a web server, right? You can choose, of course, to cache them locally, but right now the application is built actually to retrieve all the data directly from the web server. And you can see the population, split it by groups of age and by sex and so on. You can see also the racial profile, and as you can see, it's like a really nice visualization. And you have the households, and also you can actually see on a map where the El Dorado County of California is. And also, the application actually reacts to the screen orientation. So as you can see, it changed. Now the left side, it's actually docked, right? And I have like two parts in my application. And when I change to portrait, it goes again to a floating left side in order to fit the screen. Right, so that was on my iPad. Now, do you like beer? Not really? Is this Germany or France? Because I really have a problem if it's not Germany, because I only have an application for social beer drinkers. I don't have one for wine. So it's called Untap. It's available for free in stores on Android and Apple. And this application is about beer. You end up like me in a new place. I was yesterday evening alone in Cologne. I have a wife back home, so I cannot socialize freely. And I said, okay, let's drink some beer. And this application allows you to see what is cool in terms of beer locally, right? So it detects the geolocation of where you are, and it provides you some advice, some tips. Maybe you should try this Gaffel Kölsch. It's a local beer. My German is awful. So this is what I had actually yesterday. And I took even a picture of the beer, right? And I can, basically every time you can, when you drink a beer, you can check in that beer, you can take a photo, you can, I don't know, rate the beer, and you can share everything with all your friends, and you can check what your friends are drinking, and so on. Let me see, actually, drink up. What is the trending beer locally? So, Früh-Kölsch, again, pardon my German, Reisdorf-Kölsch. Is it true? Is it cool? Gilden-Kölsch, and so on. Now, you can download this application. My phone is sliding away. So don't be afraid, it's digital. It's not analogic, it's just an effect on my camera. Okay, so you can check these applications, and probably you'll find them useful, as I found them. And this is actually pretty interesting because they are quite powerful. I would say that are actually quite user-friendly in terms of user experience, the workflows, and yet they are created using HTML and JavaScript and CSS. So no Objective-C, no Java, nothing native. And I think actually this is pretty cool. Questions so far? By the way, if you have questions, you can ask. Felix told me that he charges €5 a question. Okay.
I have a question.
Yep.
Is PhoneGap also
it's
the
free.
solution for starting a full-screen application without needing the user to say, I want to have full screen?
Actually, PhoneGap starts only full screen.
Okay.
So the minute you press on an icon of a PhoneGap application, which remember, it's just a native application, it starts full screen. So
the Android bar, for example?
You can specify. You should be able to specify from the configuration XML that you don't want the location bar, or what's the name of that bar. You should be able. I haven't tried, but this is usually actually how you specify in an Android application. Do you want the bar or not? Okay. So I think these were the apps. And there's another app on my iPod. I don't have my iPod in my pocket. I will not lose time to search for it. That was actually recently launched. It's just a game, a card type of game. It was launched, I don't know, this month or last month, and it already reached like 1 million downloads, although it's available only for iPod and iOS. They didn't make a version for iPad, which is pretty cool. Again, a quite successful game, 1 million downloads. It's quite a number, built with HTML and CSS and JavaScript. So you can actually use PhoneGap for games as well. Right. Let's go back to slides because you don't like demos. I don't know why.
I think we have a question on that.
Yeah, yeah.
Why do you say it's only for iOS and it's so easy to support it for other platforms too? Why did they choose to only support it for iOS?
I think it is a legitimate question, and the answer I can only, I don't know, make suppositions. I didn't interview them. Sometimes people are looking at the market for their type of applications, and they decide, if I'm going to build a game, then iOS, by far, it's the most lucrative platform. And they tend to focus on that single market. But because they chose PhoneGap, if later on they decide to move to Android or BlackBerry or Microsoft, it will be easy, right? So I think they made the decision thinking about extending or expanding the number of the platforms. But in the beginning, many companies, even those big companies or the small companies, looking at their target, they are choosing to focus only on one market. So they can pump up the money for advertising only on App Store instead of spreading the money on Android market, on whatever. This is one answer. I don't know.
I think that's a pretty big case to make for a certain skill set. If you're a very good JavaScript developer and a very crappy Objective-C or Java developer, your JavaScript application is probably going to be better. And Wikipedia is actually one of those cases. You know, Wikipedia has loads of talent in that area. And their first phone application was Android only. They just didn't have time or the talent to develop a proper native Android application, so they went for PhoneGap for the Android application. And I think, I'm just guessing here, but I think they very quickly realized either way, we're web developers, so maybe we should make a very good Android application developed on all platforms.
Yeah, that's actually a very good point. As I started to talk about mobile development like 2 years ago, and more I meet people who are either working directly for a company, which many times is like a big company, or they are like hired by a company like external consultants to build mobile apps. And more I hear about budget and money problems. Even big companies realize that if they have to maintain 3 or 4 different source projects in order to reach Android, iOS, Microsoft, and BlackBerry, for example, it is simply too expensive for them. Sometimes it's expensive in terms of money, sometimes it's expensive in terms of time. Because usually when you have to deliver something for multiple platforms, even if it is native, you focus first on the most important or whatever, and once you have something that it's running, you start to create for the second platform and the third platform and so forth. So due to this cost, either as a time or both, time and money, more companies and more people, again, I will stress this out, even big companies, are looking for solutions that help them to, at least in theory, write once and run everywhere. So Felix already told you about how PhoneGap or Cordova is working. I will just quickly reiterate some of the points he made. So on all the mobile platforms that PhoneGap supports, you'll find some sort of a component that it's called the web view. And the web view itself is just basically a Chrome-less browser. So you take the browser, you make it full screen, and you remove the location bar, I don't know, bookmarks, buttons, navigation buttons, and you end up with this web view. Now, the cool thing with the web view is that you can actually extend it, and you can inject additional features or functionalities that will be available to the JavaScript code that it's running inside of the web view. And this is how actually PhoneGap or Cordova works. So it uses the web view, or what's the name on a given platform, and then there is like a native engine that actually exposes or augments the web view in order to provide access to the address book, to starting a call, to do a notification, and so forth. And then to the PhoneGap developer, those native features or capabilities are exposed via of a JavaScript engine, which is the red box in my drawing, Cordova JavaScript engine. And finally, of course, all your application UI, and probably in most of the cases, all your application business logic will be written in JavaScript, and for the UI itself, you'll be using HTML and CSS. Now, if we go back to the slide with built-in capabilities, you'll notice that there are lots. So right out of the box, you have storage, you have notification, vibration, sound, and so forth. But I don't see here, for example, gyroscope, right? Maybe you want to build a game for iOS, and you want to use the gyroscope in order to control the character of your game, right? What do? You call PhoneGap guys to build that for you? Not really. Actually, you can use the same approach the PhoneGap team took, and you can create something that it's called a plugin. And you'll be writing some native code, the native code that exposes the gyroscope or whatever the feature you want to expose to your code. And then that feature will be actually consumed by the PhoneGap developer via a JavaScript API. So a plugin has basically two parts. The native part, which exposes the native API, and the JavaScript API, which in turn exposes the native part you wrote to the JavaScript developer who wants to use your plugin. And depending on who is writing the plugins, you can create a plugin for multiple platforms having the same JavaScript API, and actually this is the best practice, right? On the other hand, as Felix said, if the gyroscope is not presented on a BlackBerry probably you'll just implement the API for not doing anything meaningful, and maybe you can have an API call that tells you at runtime, is the gyroscope available on the machine or not? And if you go to talking about plugins, let me actually show you some examples. Plugins. So you'll find this link on the slides. If you go to this GitHub repository, you'll find lots of plugins, and they are grouped by operating system. So if you go, for example, to Android, you'll find a bunch of them. For example, you have a plugin that allows you to retrieve all the accounts that are set for that phone. And if you take a look at the plugin itself, it's really simple. It has, as you imagine, it has the native part. It's just a Java class that extends the plugin class part of the Cordova or PhoneGap. You see, here is the class, and provides a method called execute. And inside of this method does all the magic. It uses the Android Java API in order to retrieve the accounts and returns the results using a JSON encoding. And the execute method is actually the method that it's called automatically by PhoneGap whenever you try to use the account list plugin. And this is the JavaScript API. So as I said, you have to have the native code, and then you have to expose to the PhoneGap developer the native code via a JavaScript API. So basically here it defines a new object, account list, which uses the PhoneGap exec API in order to call on the account list, which is the Java class, the execute method. And it passes some callbacks functions for success and for fail. And here the plugin, it's actually added. And in order to add to your PhoneGap project this plugin, it's pretty simple. You have to copy the jar file or the source file, so the Java file, to the source folder of your Android project. And then, of course, you have to include the JavaScript API, that simple JavaScript file. And then in the plugins XML, you have to define the plugin. And depending on what the plugin does, in the case of Android, remember you have to set or to opt in for permissions. If your plugin uses the network or the camera or the microphone, you'll have to add permissions for these things. So this is about plugins. Once again, if you go here, you'll find lots of them. People are building them, and they are willing to share them, and you'll find for all platforms all sorts of plugins. And I've been focusing on plugins so far only from the point of view of exposing some capability that it's not supported out of the box by Cordova or PhoneGap. Another good reason for writing a PhoneGap plugin is when you do some heavy lifting in your application. Maybe you are processing the images, a large image the user just took with his camera, and you do some crazy stuff. You run some expensive, in terms of time, algorithms, right? For this use case, you can again go with a native with a plugin, and basically the native code will do all the crunching, and you will enjoy basically the biggest power you can get on that platform this way. And the JavaScript API will then return the completed data or the calculated data, and from there on you can go to present those data to the user. Questions? We don't have questions. Is it good or not? Let's see quickly how you can actually build Cordova apps. Now, the main point to realize is that because you are going to use HTML, JavaScript, and CSS, actually most of the time you'll be creating your application, your PhoneGap application, the same way you'll be creating a web application. This means probably you're going to use your favorite editor. Could be Dreamweaver from Adobe, could be VI, could be Visual Studio, whatever you like. And of course you're going to test your code a lot on your desktop browser, actually. Why? Because it's faster. It's much faster. You are doing the editing, right, on your desktop or laptop, instead of waiting to package the application, install the application on the mobile phone. You can quickly test your code, especially when you don't need device capabilities like gyroscope or camera. And at some point, when you reach those limitations, you'll have actually to test your application either on an emulator or simulator, or, and this is the best way actually, on the physical device. Now, one of the questions I've been seeing when people are just learning about PhoneGap is, okay, this sounds cool, I can reach all these 7 platforms, I can write once and run everywhere. What about UI? What about PhoneGap, I don't know, toolbox with UI components? Well, I have to disappoint you. PhoneGap out of the box doesn't offer any UI library, which is actually good because you can use whatever you feel, I don't know, confident or you enjoy from other projects from the HTML world. You can use maybe jQuery mobile, you can use Bootstrap from Twitter. They recently launched the version number 2, which adds supports for mobile development. So you could be very successful with Bootstrap. You can use Sencha and so forth in terms of UI frameworks. Then in terms of MVC frameworks and templates, again, it's up to you. You can use whatever you want from the JavaScript world. But there are 2 things you have to pay attention. First, the differences in terms of performance between desktop and mobile. Remember that at the end of the day, your PhoneGap application will be as good as a web application that runs inside of the browser of that phone, right? So if you start using frameworks that were built with desktop in mind and that are using, I don't know, crazy stuff, they are heavy on the JavaScript side of manipulating the DOM and so forth, you have to test them on the mobile phones you are targeting. And remember, not everybody has the latest Android phone with quad-core or dual-core and so forth. So this is one thing you have to be aware. And the second is that mobile browsers are not equal. So for example, SVG support, it's not everywhere, right? On iOS, you have SVG. I don't know, Windows 7 has SVG support. Windows Phone has SVG support. Android 2.x or 3.x, as far as I know, doesn't have SVG support. Canvas on some platform, it's hardware accelerated. On others, it's not hardware accelerated. So again, you have to pay attention to these features, to these things. Now, how do you build the native installer? So you use your tool chain, your favorite tool chain for the platforms you want to target, and now it's the big moment. Okay, I want to put everything together and get the IPA file or the APK or whatever. There are basically 2 methods. You can use the native toolchain, which means Visual Studio and the Windows machine for Windows Phone, Xcode and the Mac OS for iOS, Android and Eclipse and so forth. Which it's actually cool, at least in the beginning, right? Because as you start to support more platforms, you'll end up with multiple computers. If you are a Windows guy, you'll need a Mac just for the iOS. If you are a Mac guy, you'll need a Microsoft box or a virtual machine, and so forth. And you'll have to duplicate the projects, and so forth. It's not that funny, but it's definitely possible, and if you don't reach many platforms, it's actually sustainable. You have here a bunch of resources, how to get you started with all these native platforms using, again, the native toolchain. And the second method of building the native installers is by using PhoneGap build. Who knows what PhoneGap build is? Wow, that's extraordinary. So, PhoneGap build. Let me actually show you the PhoneGap build in person. It's still in beta, which means it's free, and it seems it will be always free for open source projects. Basically, PhoneGap build allows you to upload your JavaScript code, CSS files, HTML, images, whatever you need for your PhoneGap project to exist and run, to our servers. And our servers will start to crunch the data, and they will give you the native installers. Isn't that cool? And they are pretty fast, like 1, maybe 2 minutes, given the fact that the whole thing is actually in beta. So let me actually show you the workflow. I'm logged in with my account, and I can create a new application. I can provide a name for my application, I don't know, maybe Geo. And then I can, this is the cool thing actually. As I said, I can upload an archive with everything, or if I prefer GitHub, for example, and I have everything stored in a GitHub repository, I can actually specify just the GitHub URL. And the PhoneGap build will go to the GitHub repository, pull out the code, and build everything for me. Now, this is real cool. So, a friend of mine and colleague actually put together some examples. So, for example, the geolocation API. This is his GitHub repository. So I'll just copy the URL and paste it here, and click on Create. And voila, I have an application. And the servers are crunching the data. Now, while this is happening in the background, let me tell you another 2 or 3 things about PhoneGap. First, you can actually make your application public or private. If you are building an open source project, probably you'll want to let the builder or that specific application to be public, and anyone who has an account on PhoneGap build will be able to get the native installers. Also, if you decide to make your application, for example, private, you can actually add multiple users. And you can actually choose what role a user should have. For example, you can add testers. They will be able to download the installers. Or you can add developers. They will be able to download and also modify the code. And of course, as you know, for Android, iOS, and BlackBerry, in order to create a native installer, you have to provision or to provide some keys for signing the code, right? And this is actually supported by the PhoneGap build. So if I go, for example, to my account here, and I choose the signing, I can see the 3 platforms that are requiring this, and then I can upload the keys I want, and I can select the default one, and so on. And those keys or provisioning files will be used every time you build for that particular platform. It seems I already have an application. So for Android, it's already done. I can choose now to download the APK file, or of course, I can use my barcode application and just take a picture. Just take a picture of the QR code, and the application is downloaded. OK. Now I install the application. I'm presented with the permissions that the application requires in order to run. And this is a really simple application. It just illustrates the geolocation API. So I have the latitude, the longitude, and so forth. So this was the PhoneGap build. And I hope you enjoyed. As I told you, it's still in beta. We are looking forward to get your feedback. We are confident that actually makes the things a lot easier for you. As you can see, having like a cloud service that builds for you for all these different platforms, it's quite useful. And I think with that, I will switch back to Felix to do the Microsoft Visual Studio demo, right?
Yeah, so that was... Can you actually leave it? Because I could use the camera in a minute. Is that possible?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
So, that was pretty cool. What I want to show you very quickly is how PhoneGap integrates into the individual editors. So what I'm going to do is very quickly. Yeah, that's all right. I need 5. So usually, if you would start off creating a new project, you would usually choose Windows Phone application. What you can do instead, once you install Cordova, you can just go for Cordova Starter, which is like a very simple template. Yeah, save that. And then you can just go and work on your project like you used to. As you can see, you have PhoneGap and the individual libraries around here, and you can just do your normal coding. What I'm going to do now very quickly, I'm going to copy stuff from another template, another project I did a couple of minutes ago. It's basically just copied code to show how to work with the camera. I'm going to go back to my new project. I'm going to create a new project, Cordova Starter. All right. All I have to do is, in this case, I just have to replace the index.html with my ready-made application. And now I can just deploy it to my device. It's actually that simple. We're doing that right now. And I think we have to switch in a minute so I can show it to you on the camera. That's all right.
You have to give us extra points. We are organized like the German national soccer team. We'll beat the French. Yeah.
All right, cool. So that actually deployed. I could actually debug it live. So I could set breakpoints in here, and it would stop here and stuff like that. But what I want to show you very quickly is I can now capture a photo. It will fail because of an error. That is great. Cool example.
It's the PhoneGap, I'm sure.
Hopefully.
Come on, don't kill me.
So that failed.
OK.
What is going on there? Who did that example?
A good man.
I'm sure. That's all right. We can...
Do you need a connection?
Oh, that's all right. We can try something else. Give me a minute. Because I did my own one a couple of months ago. We can just use that. Oh, yeah, because the camera is not working with the cable connected. Thank you.
It scares me, the knowledge you have about Microsoft phones. I'm just joking. You should pay him $5.
Maybe I should, yeah. Let me just find my application. How did I call it? I called it Code of a Starter 3.
Nice logo.
Yeah, that's you guys, right? And now it's actually working fine. As you can see, it's running the native launcher.
Can you take a photo of me?
Of you?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can.
With all these people applauding. And, hey, I will feel like a rock star.
So obviously, this is really simple, right? This is not really that big, but it's just showing how it can run the native.
Thank you.
How it can run the native user interface that is integrated into Windows Phone from a JavaScript API. That's basically all I wanted to show. I wanted to show you how simple it is. That obviously we did the learning of that you have to disconnect your phone, otherwise it won't work. But there is our picture now within the application.
Nice T-shirt.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Really cool shirt. And that's all we wanted to do. Obviously, we're going to do, I think, how many minutes do we have left?
6.
6
Do you
minutes?
have questions?
Obviously, we're going to do, 5 minutes of quick Q&A. Shoot. Yes, please. Okay, I'm quickly going to translate that for Mihai.
No, don't need. Don't waste
all right,
time.
We're going to save time.
We're
going to save time. There are, es sind Plugins verfügbar. Je nach Plattform verfügt die Plattform über eigenen QR-Scanner. Also zum Beispiel bei Windows Phone ist es einfach ins System integriert. Ansonsten muss man das über Plugins lösen. Cordova verfügt gerade nicht über integrierte QR-Scanner. Ansonsten, wenn die Frage war, wie man die Anwendung installiert, ich kann nur für Windows Phone sprechen. Sobald die Kamera einen QR-Code erkennt, macht die, was immer man tun muss. Auf anderen Plattformen braucht man einen entsprechenden Scanner.
So I can take my Visual Basic.NET code, encoding the QR, the photo, and build a plugin, and then I have it for the one platform. I will have to rebuild that plugin for our platform.
Yes, exactly.
Your German is amazing.
Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead. The guy in the back. Yo.
One question. The PhoneGap, am I able to implement native Android components like broadcast intent receivers? I have to declare them in the manifest, and then they are called out system at some point in time when the intent is sent out of the system. Am I able to do this with PhoneGap, or am I limited in this option?
So the
For
question.
example, can I react incoming SMS calls, push data?
So if I understand you correctly, it's a question about can I leave the sandbox using PhoneGap?
No, can I somehow implement this behavior with PhoneGap? For example, can I react somehow to an incoming SMS and do something?
Oh, I know what you mean. So, I think this really depends on the platform. This is not integrated for a very simple reason. Most platforms don't really expose events like incoming SMS. And if they do, as I told you, I'm also working with Windows 8, which is actually doing that. It's a security nightmare. You actually have to spend months and months thinking about what agent within the platform is able to receive text messages, because that is obviously very critical personal user information. So I think the decisive answer is PhoneGap doesn't have that. If your platform is able to expose text messages to an app, which I think is possible on Android, then you could write a plugin. But obviously, I think Android is the only platform that is that open about that.
So you have your code base all the time to mobile devices. What do you do with the code if you want to make a desktop? Like
That's a good question. So, of course, for now, there is no easy solution. There is nothing like a PhoneGap desktop. It's an interesting idea. We'd like to hear more from you people if you think that would be something interesting. But the short answer is you're going to rip off the device APIs that are not available on the desktop, like, I don't know, geolocation, or no, geolocation is actually usually available. The contact list, address book, and so forth. you'll take those things apart and you'll end up with a web application.
So for the time being, there's no blind layer of these things that doesn't...
Nope, nope. But we are hearing this from more and more lately. People are asking for a desktop.
What I can say for Windows 8 is that it's actually quite easy because HTML5 and JavaScript is integrated as native development into Windows 8. And many of those, actually all of those, Windows is somewhat larger than PhoneGap, but all those APIs you find in PhoneGap, including the namespaces, I'm going to be too simple here. Obviously, it's more complex. But in theory, you just have to replace all those PhoneGap, or in this case, Cordova.somewhat namespaces with WinJS.somewhat. So.
And you would end up with HTML with some folders or package?
On Windows?
Yes.
Yeah, Windows has application packages. And in there, you have HTML files and JavaScript files. So basically, you know, without the namespaces, you can use it anywhere. That's really simple. But the cool thing is, PhoneGap namespaces are quite similar to what you would find for the respective features you're using in Windows 8.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. So one thing I like to say is, and I actually invited a friend of mine, which is talking tomorrow about why native development has still a point. PhoneGap is not a license to disregard user experience. PhoneGap is a license to make development much more efficient, much more easy. So certainly, yes, please, don't develop crappy applications just because it's easy. It's a legitimate question. So I think CSS has very powerful methods of allowing you to style things, and Cordova actually has a very powerful API that does not just give you which operating system it is running on, but also which device, which resolution, all that stuff you would need to make your application look like a native application and give the user actually the best user experience you can do. And I think we both totally encourage you to please do good user experience.
Yeah. You don't want to be in a room with a bunch of Objective-C developers telling you, here, it's a crappy PhoneGap application, looks like shit. No, you don't want. For those who still have questions, please come by to us during the lunch break. Thank you, Oliver, for having me here.
Thank
you. It was my pleasure.
Thank you both.
And thank you, Felix, for agreeing. Yeah.